Why are Catholic converts like super excited, almost to the point where it's like mania? It's crazy, but it's true. We just finished Easter and my social media feed is filled with people who just joined the Catholic Church who are like, they're so excited. They're like jumping up and down, praising God. It's almost like they just completed an Ironman triathlon event or they climbed Mount Everest. I have never seen people more excited in my life to join a church than I have since I've become Catholic and have been plugged into these things. And I want to talk about why that is. And it's not just because I think it's cool, although I do, but because I think that there's something to this. I think there's something profound and powerful that we all can learn from this experience of watching people in this moment. You know, I've seen, as probably a lot of you have, that picture that you see sometimes in Christian bookstores or whatever, of the person who has died and they're meeting Jesus and they're standing outside the gates of heaven and Jesus is just hugging that person, and the look on Christ's face is just like, oh, you're home. That's what it feels like, you guys, to a lot of Catholic converts. Now, I know, disclaimer, there are plenty of people who join the Catholic Church that do it because they're getting married to somebody or they're trying to appease some relative or whatever, and they might just be like, yeah, I don't really care. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who actually have gone on this journey, this incredibly arduous and difficult and long process that it takes to actually come into the church because they want to. Because they have this pull and this calling and this realization that the Catholic Church is the true church founded by Jesus Christ. So let's talk for a minute about that. And I know that this is like, a little bit annoying to people. And obviously it's annoying to a lot of Protestants who are like, oh man, these poor deceived Catholics who have left the truth of Christianity in the Protestant world and now they've joined this man-made institution that's full of abuse and hypocrisy and problems, and they just can't comprehend it. I mean, I remember when I came into the church, I had people in my life that were just like, what? I could have done anything else. I could have said, hey, you know what? I'm becoming a Mooney or whatever, and they'd have been like, oh, okay, that's nice. But when you say you're becoming Catholic, some people are just like, you've got to be out of your mind. But I'll tell you what, my friends, it has been an incredible experience, and to see people walking through that, it's exciting. It's a little annoying to some Protestants. And guess what? It's even a little annoying, unfortunately, to some Catholics. Because here's the thing. Catholic converts are sort of their own breed of crazy in love with the church. So we do crazy things sometimes, like we make YouTube channels, or we want to tell our story, or we write blogs, or we start a podcast or whatever. And, I get some pushback even from some Catholics who are like, oh, brother, another convert that's got to tell their story and do a thing, and I get that. I mean, it saddens me that people have that attitude, but, I understand, because let's face it, some people just don't understand that excitement because they've always grown up in it. And for them, it's just like breathing air. They don't get it. But I want to talk for a few minutes just about 5 reasons why Catholic converts are so out of their mind, crazy excited for joining the church. All right, number 1. Because it feels like the lights just came on. I mean, that's a feeling, and it's not really like what's the Bible verse and chapter and all that. I don't have that for this one. I can just tell you the feeling, okay? The feeling when you finally come into the Catholic Church, or when you realize the truths about the Catholic Church, it's like you've been walking around, I don't want to say completely in the dark, because if you're a Protestant, you love Jesus, you're not in the darkness. You have the light of Christ, but when you come into the Catholic faith, it's like, oh, really? I didn't know about this. This is pretty awesome. And that's the feeling that I can only describe it as. It's like you just walked into a room and then the lights just came on. You're like, oh, wow, this is cool. And that's a powerful feeling. And when people experience that, they're excited. I remember when my son was having a hard time seeing, at least we thought, but he didn't know that was his problem. And we got him glasses, and he put the glasses on and he goes, whoa, it's like everything just went into HD. And that's kind of the same feeling that a lot of Catholic converts have, my friends. Like, oh, I could see, some of this stuff. I understood some of it, but when I've come into the Catholicism, to the Catholic faith, it's like, wow, now it's all way clearer. It's an incredible feeling. So that's one reason why it's like, oh, now things make sense. And the reason number two sort of illuminates that. It's because we are discovering answers to questions that we never even knew we had. Now, those questions were always there. It's just we didn't really understand that. Questions like, what is the relationship between the church and the Bible? How do we understand rightly the Bible? I mean, we've all been brought up in the Protestant world, those of us that were brought up that way, with this understanding of, well, the Bible is our authority, the Bible, but there's always been these lingering questions like, well, why are there so many different views of what the Bible teaches? And how do we know who's right? And where did the Bible come from? And how do we know that we can trust the Bible? And how does that all work together? These are questions that we've just sort of categorized under the category of mysteries, or, well, things we just have to not pretend not to think about. But when you come into the Catholic faith, it's like you now finally can make sense of the Bible. You can now finally understand what it is and what it's for and how it's to be understood and how it's to be used in a way that is like, oh, how did I not see this before? It's incredible. We have answers to questions that we didn't really understand before, like authority and history. Where did all this come from? This whole Christian faith and the whole idea of what the church is supposed to be. When you're not a Catholic, you have this weird understanding of the church as like, well, is it this invisible thing that you don't know if you're really a part of or whoever else is a part of, or is there a structure to it? How did it come to be, and what happened in history, and all of these things? When you become Catholic, it's like you see all the dots connecting throughout history and you go, oh, now this makes sense. It's incredible, and people want to talk about it. They're excited to be a part of that, because when you become Catholic, you also, this is number three, you've become part of something truly greater than yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that like you recognize that when you look at the history of salvation and the people of God, you see that you have become part of this in a very real, tangible way. Not just this mystical idea of, well, yeah, because I have these beliefs, I'm somehow, linked to different people. But no, you're like, okay, I am in this church that's spoken about in the scriptures, that it's spoken about, like these guys in the texts, they started this thing that was given to them by Christ. Christ said, I will build my church. And like, I'm a member of that. Like, not just like because I think something, because I've actually gone through the process and I have said, yes, I am a member of Christ's one holy Catholic apostolic church. It's interesting that, a lot of people, that's controversial. I went to a Protestant church the other day because my daughter leads worship at a Protestant church, and I wanted to support her, so after I went to Mass, I went to this church so I could support my daughter. And, you can judge me if you want to, but I'm going to support my daughter. And there was a time in the service when we stood up to read the Apostles' Creed. And I thought, this is kind of cool, And as we're reading it, it got, I believe in one holy, they changed the word Catholic to universal church. And even my daughter goes like, oh, wait a second, I thought the word was Catholic. And I'm like, yeah, it is. They didn't like that word, so they changed it. You recognize that word is more than just, the little asterisk meaning universal. It is the one holy Catholic apostolic church founded by Jesus Christ. And when you become Catholic, you've gone through this process, you're finally now like in this beautiful, supernatural, yet worldly thing called the Catholic Church founded by Jesus Christ. And it is greater than ourselves. I mean, we have all these saints that we look to for our heritage. And that's another thing I would talk about, because like you recognize that this community, this cloud of witnesses that the book of Hebrews talks about, these are actual people that lived for Christ, that believed and taught and passed the faith on to us. We didn't just invent this thing that we've done our whole lives and kind of, well, yeah, I sort of put my ideas together here and there. And I borrow from this guy I like, and I borrow from that guy I like. And I know it's not exactly the same, but I sort of just like created this faith in my mind based on my understanding of the Bible and where I feel the Holy Spirit's leading me, and sort of created this thing that will change from time to time as I hear a different preacher I like or whatever. No. When you become Catholic, all of that goes away. You rest in the knowledge that you are truly part of something greater than yourself. And there's an incredible amount of joy, an incredible amount of peace in that. Because now you're not your own, authority on what everything has to be, and you got to figure everything out and go through all that. It's maddening and it's exhausting. And when you become Catholic, you can rest in the knowledge that Jesus Christ said, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. And that the Holy Spirit would guide the church into all truth. When you finally come into the church, you recognize that you have joined yourself to Christ's body and those promises that were given. And it's very exciting. Okay, number 4, because there is a tangible grace that is really imparted to you in the sacraments that you can't fully wrap your mind around or wrap your words around, but your response is just to be like, this is awesome. And that's hard for other people to understand sometimes because they haven't done it, because in their churches, this idea of the sacraments as a means of grace is really loosely discussed, and in some places completely pushed aside altogether. But in Catholicism, of course, we recognize that there is actual tangible grace given to us in the sacraments. And when we finally get to come forward and receive Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, it's like something we can't even fathom. We can't even comprehend it. It's so amazing. So we get fired up about it. And this is where I push back against the what I call like the grouchy Catholics that are always like the fun haters that are always like, oh, you converts just need to just shut up. I'm sick of hearing about you. Here's the thing. Too bad. Like, we're fired up. Maybe you ought to look at your own faith and your own life and ask yourself, are you really that excited about it? Or have you become lukewarm in your faith and are just sort of like, yeah, whatever, going through the motions? I'm telling you, you need to learn from people who are super fired up, whether they're converts or cradle Catholics. The worst thing that we can have, my friends, are people who have the graces of the Catholic faith but don't recognize how amazing and how awesome they are and have fallen out of love with the sacraments. That's bad. So when converts come in every year, that should be a shot in the arm of enthusiasm and excitement for people. I know it's been that for me. I've only been Catholic for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. And when I saw all the people coming into the church this year, man, it just fired me up anew. I'm so excited about it. And a lot of it has to do, guys, with that tangible grace that we receive in the sacraments. Okay, number 5, last one. Here's the deal. Converts are super excited because their journey into the church has not been easy, but it has been worth it. When I used to be a pastor, it was really easy to join our church. I mean, it was. You'd come to a class, and sometimes, in some churches I was a part of, you just say, hey, I want to be a part of your church. And we just go, okay, boom, you're done. You're in. You're part of our church now. You've just officially joined our church. And that really didn't mean anything. I mean practically. Like, there was no added benefit or anything that was tangibly different in your life because you were now part of our church versus when you weren't a member of our church. And we did that on purpose, actually, because we were trying to make it easy for people. And then I've served churches where, it was a little bit more difficult to get into the church. But when I say difficult, you had to go to a 2-hour class on a Sunday afternoon. And you had to learn a little bit of the history of our church. You had to learn a little bit about the programs of our church so we knew where to plug you in. You had to, kind of share a little bit about your story. But really, it was relatively easy. There wasn't a whole lot required. And I know that there are other forms of Protestant churches where a lot more goes into it. But man, what it takes to become Catholic is pretty heavy duty. I mean, if you're a person who's gone through RCIA, you've been in a class for months. You've gone through a lot of learning and growing and sacrifice. Maybe you had stuff that you had to deal with in your marriage or with different things. And a lot of people check out when they realize how demanding it is to come into the Catholic faith. A lot of people are like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be that difficult. Why does the church make it so difficult to join? And, we can talk about that. But here's the thing. When you've come through that, when you've persevered, when you've made sacrifices, when you've said that this thing that I want to do at the end of this is worth whatever I have to go through to get there, then when you finally do, there's just an incredible moment of celebration and rejoicing. I mean, it's kind of like what the New Testament talks about when we reach the end of our life and we're going to go be with Jesus. I mean, what does St. Paul say? I have fought the fight. I have kept the faith. I've run the race. And now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness. Like St. Paul's picture of what it means to walk through life to get to heaven, it does not paint it as an easy thing. I mean, look at his life. All he did after he came to know Christ was suffer for the faith. And yet, he walks into it willingly with joy. It's the same guy who says, rejoice always. Again, I say rejoice. That's where we are as converts. We've gone through a lot, but now we've arrived and we rejoice. And it's amazing and it's incredible. And friends, I tell you what, if you see someone excited about that, don't try to tell them to calm down. Don't try to tell them to keep their mouth shut or to stop being annoyed. Friends, cheer them on. Rejoice with them. You know, I think about what Jesus said about what happens when a shepherd loses one sheep and he leaves the 99 to go after that one. And when he finds it, what does he do? He rejoices. And what does Jesus say? That he rejoices in heaven. There's more rejoicing in heaven over that one sinner who converts than over the 99 who needed no repentance. And friends, I believe with all my heart that when someone makes that long, arduous journey into the Catholic Church, when they finally arrive, there is incredible rejoicing. Friends, if you're new to the church this year, I want to welcome you. I want to tell you how excited I am for you and tell you that, man, what you are walking into is going to be the greatest adventure of your life. It's not always going to be easy. And here's the thing that a lot of converts don't understand, which is why I wrote my book, shameless plug, is that this is just the beginning. There's a sense of when you walk into the church that like, oh, I've arrived, I'm now Catholic. But really, you just like stepped into this thing that you are going to spend your entire life growing into and learning and experiencing. And there are new treasures around every corner, things that God has in store for you that are going to blow your mind every step of the way. And it is a powerfully exciting journey, friends. So welcome home. Welcome to the church founded by Jesus Christ on his apostles, specifically on the rock of Peter, who holds the keys of the kingdom. And those keys are given so that we might know truth from deception, that we might know light from darkness, because Jesus doesn't want his church wandering around divided, not knowing where to go, not knowing what's true. He wants his church to know everything, to know everything that they need to know for salvation. He's given us so much, my friends. And I want to welcome you to that, friends. God bless all of you. Thank you so much for watching this video. And for those of you that have just come into the church, once again, I'll say to you, with all excitement and rejoicing, welcome home.